writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Joni. Today on the podcast, we talk to Nick Thacker, who is the USA Today best-selling author of action, adventure, thrillers, and mysteries, including the Harvey Bennett thriller series. He currently lives on a volcano in Hawaii, which he was just about to move to when Steph and I spoke to him.
Yeah, I'm a little upset he didn't tell us that his house would be on a volcano. We didn't learn any about that.
I think Hawaii is all volcanoes, no?
I'm not sure. I would like to go. One day I'll reach there.
One day.
But in all seriousness, so we talked to him about his career and why he decided to do indie publishing. He talked to us a little bit about marketing, and like one of the biggest issues is getting actual customers to convert and actually buy their books. So he goes into a little bit about his marketing strategy. And then he also talked to us about his most recent publishing contract that he has with Book Couture. So we cover a lot of topics. It was great talking to Nick. So we hope you enjoy the interview. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nick. Before we get into it, can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
A bit about myself, sure. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I am a full-time author of thrillers, action adventure, Indiana Jones meets National Treasure type books. I started in about 2012 with an idea to just write a book for my dad, because how hard could it be? Very naive, very clueless, but I never would have finished had I known how difficult it was going to be. And so I think that naivety is sort of how every step of the way has been, let's just go into this because I don't know how hard it is. And if I find out, then I won't finish it. That's how my career started. I started doing that and wrote the second book and then the third book and then started progressing. The third book I wrote was probably the one that still sells the best. It's called The Enigma Strain. And it's actually doing really well right now because it's about a virus that kind of spreads across the United States and kills a bunch of people. So
who would have guessed?
The irony.
I promise I didn't plan it that way. I also didn't create the virus, but that one does really well. That's the first in the Harvey Bennett thrillers series. And that's my kind of bread and butter series. I'm on book 9 now. And then who knows what will happen next. We'll probably continue doing that one. But I'm now doing a lot of co-writing and all kinds of nonfiction things that involve marketing, consulting, things like that. That's basically it. I left my full-time day job about 3 years ago, and my wife left her job a few months after that. Didn't plan it that way, but that's what happened. And so we became sort of a nomadic family that could just run around the world and write books for a living.
You're living the dream.
Well, you know, like bunker here, my canvas drop cloth as my background. It's my dream. That's true.
You said that you started out writing for your dad. Did you plan always to publish independently? Was that always part of it?
No. Like I said, I came into this whole thing very naive. And so I had no idea. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so at the time, this was 2012. I think I started in 2011. And this was right at the cusp of the Kindle blow up and revolution and all that. The John Lockes and the Amanda Hawkings and of course, you know, Joe Conrads, people like that. And so I had finished the book and tried to figure, I bought, what's that? I have it around here somewhere. It's that publisher's guide, the big fat thing that has all the publishers and how to send to agents and all that. So I bought one of those and I was getting ready to query everything. And then I thought, you know, I don't really see a downside in just trying this Kindle thing first and seeing if I can, you know, get a book in all the different stores. And then maybe that'll help get a publishing. I had no idea. Maybe that'll help get a publishing deal. And so I did that and just sort of let it go. It was always sort of just a fun side thing. My goal was to have a book that was a real book at the time. You know, I thought that meant it had to be hardcover, really nice print. Yes, I just went through Lulu for the hardcover and the paperback and did the Kindle one, the ebook version through Kindle. And that was it. I didn't really think much about it. It didn't sell very well. I think I gave my copy to my dad. I don't think he even bought one, but you know, that's what happens.
Dad, come on.
But, I know. But yeah, you know, so, and then I started working on the second book, and that was probably about when I decided, okay, I'm going to kind of figure this out. I'm going to look at some different places besides Amazon to put the book for sale and see what else is out there and just play around with it. And it became serious, I think, in the third book. When I launched that one, that was, it started making money, like, you know, in the dozens of dollars a month. And I thought, oh, okay, if I just do this a lot and get better at it, maybe I can make hundreds of dollars a month. Yes, that's where I started out.
It's interesting when I like look online and see like the authors that were like really big in like 2013 and they're no longer around. And I'm so curious to know what happened to them.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that I've reached out to and that I was connected with back then and have experienced the same thing. And so just like, hey, are you dead? Like what's going on? You know,
yeah.
And they're fine. They're just deciding to do different things. And it's really intriguing and interesting. I mean, I'm sure some of them probably just decided to stop writing books altogether, but I know a few of them they're just living their lives.
What do you think are some of the key components that make a good mystery or a thriller?
That is a big question. I'm actually trying to answer that myself a lot because I'm working on, I have a friend of mine who we've co-written fiction together, and we're trying to co-write a nonfiction series called the Thriller Codex, which will be one day, it will be a series of books on how to write thrillers. And so the first question, we just like, hey, how hard can this be, right? Going into everything naive, like I do. The first question was, what's a thriller? And that was about 6 months ago. We still haven't really figured out where we landed on that. But I think my theory, and this is what I've heard from a lot of authors, is it's really about the tropes. It's really about the understanding of the expectations within the genres. Like a mystery, again, I know there's going to be people out there that will poke holes and say there's always an exception that proves this rule. But I think a mystery is where you figure out who the bad guy is at the end, and a thriller is where you figure out who the bad guy is at the beginning. And again, there's always exceptions to that. But in the mysteries that I've read, it seems to be you're figuring out how to you're solving the case with the main characters as the novel progresses. And then at the end, you find out who done it. And then the thriller is more like they're just being chased the whole time by the bad guy or bad guys and trying to, not get killed. There's mystery elements in both of them, and there's thriller elements in both of them sometimes. But other than that, I think the difference is the thriller comes down to the pacing a lot of times. There's a lot of cozy mysteries that aren't necessarily fast-paced. They're super fun to read, and they read fast, but they're not fast-paced. Whereas a thriller, I think, my opinion, is if it's any good, it's pretty fast-paced. That's obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. How to write a good one, I have no idea. I'm still trying to figure that out. But that's really the biggest thing for me is starting to bite off. Writing a thriller, writing a mystery is just understanding the difference and just being really specific about which one you want to write. They're both great. They both sell well. Sometimes you can have a mystery thriller, but if you don't know, I think you're in trouble as an author. We'll see.
Do you think that marketing mysteries and thrillers should be different or approached differently?
Honestly, not really. I think that the big difference, again, in just figuring out the genre. So that's the difference is just targeting the subgenres you're going for. If it's Amazon, we're talking about, they have the, easy to find subcategories. If it's Kobo, whatever, wherever the books are being sold, they have usually different genres for these things or subgenres for these books, right? But after that, I think my approach has been treat the book like treat the book like good examples of your writing. And people who read your writing will typically like something that's in a pretty close genre like that. It's one thing if I'm writing sweet romance and mystery and thrillers. Those are pretty different. And so it's not necessarily true that my readers of my mystery thriller stuff will like historical romance. Something like that would need probably vastly different marketing approaches because you're trying to find readers in different places. But the readers that I have that really enjoy the Harvey Bennett thrillers are also going to really like Gareth Read mysteries, or I don't even think that's what I called them, but they're similar enough that I think we can get away with it. And marketing is really about having a good conversion rate. So getting people to a page and getting them to click a buy button or a download button. And then after you get that kind of nailed down, not that that's easy. I mean, there's a million things you have to do right and tweak and hone and all that stuff. Once you do that, then it's just a function of traffic. And it seems like right now anyway, what I've experienced is finding readers or finding the traffic sources for those mysteries or thrillers is pretty much the same. I can target Facebook ads will get me mystery readers and thriller readers about equally, right?
Did you notice, like when you started out and you were learning how to do this, was there one particular thing that you tweaked or changed that really changed how you sold books, or was it a more gradual process of learning?
Oh, it's very gradual for me. I know you're not asking if there's a silver bullet because there's not, and we know there's not, but is there something that really, really mattered? I think for me, every author is going to have probably a different answer to this, but for me, it was a lot of things that really mattered. A lot of stupid things that I did wrong early on. I mean, that's how I sell my consulting services. I'm like, I don't know what to do right, but I can tell you exactly what not to do because I've done all those things. So let's figure it out together, give you a bunch of money. But for me, yeah, there were a lot of big things I did wrong. I didn't understand that covers were really the most important thing because there's nothing else people have to go off of. They just see the cover and then they decide to read the title of the book and the description and all the stuff that you put on the marketing page. It's very rare that you're getting a traffic source that only reads a description without seeing a cover, right? And I've never been able to really convert that anyway. So that was a big one, was figuring out that covers matter. I had a good cover for the first book. I paid someone to do it and it looked good. And I kind of came from a graphic design background. And so I feel like I have a good eye for that. So I was lucky in that I picked something that worked well initially. But again, I wasn't really marketing that first book anyway. So it's hard to say that cover did anything for me. Since then, I've relaunched it and changed the cover and all that. But that was probably the biggest thing, was figuring out that covers are this psychological trigger for people. And if you get it right, you're going to be able to then market to them. And I talk about this a lot when I'm working on a book. Again, like all my books, it may or may not ever come out. But the idea is this psychological marketing. I don't believe that a cover sells books. All it can do is hurt your book. And what I mean by that is every book out there that anyone's going to click on to read is going to have a cover that meets a reader expectation. It looks good enough to compete in a world of good covers. I've never bought a book solely on the cover alone. So I'll look at it and, okay, this looks like an intriguing book. I'm going to go through and I'm going to read the description to see if it's actually something I want to read. And then I buy it. I've never just looked at a cover. I mean, unless it's an author I already know, but then it's the author that's selling the book, not the cover, right? So that's the danger with covers is if you get it wrong, you're going to lose sales. If you get it right, you're just going to be able to compete. Now you're in the race. I hope that makes sense. But
yeah, it does make sense. It's like the first door. Like if you block that first door, you're not getting through it all. But if what's on the back of the book doesn't appeal to you, it doesn't matter how nice the cover is.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is that the covers are so important and authors usually know that. But then there's a lot of authors that put so much weight into the cover. And my whole purpose in life is to tell authors, like, just chill out. It's okay. Like, get a good cover and then move on. Figure out how to market the rest of it or write the next book or whatever the case is. Cover's important, but it's not the only thing.
Would you say like rebranding a series is something authors should do, or would you just say start with the first cover being good?
That's the preference, is get it right the first time. Yeah. I don't think there's any way to do that. No book is ever perfect. I love indie publishing because it's an iterative process. It's kind of a lean startup mentality. I shoot for, with my beta team and editors and all that stuff, the whole process, I shoot for like a 90% good or 90% done. Finished, I should say. It's done, but 90% perfect. Because I know that no matter how many editors I pay thousands of dollars to, there's still going to be something in there that I'll find or a reader will find later on. If it's bad enough or there's enough of those things, at some point, I'll think about relaunching that book altogether, you know. And I've only done it a couple times, but as with the series, especially, one of the things that I think authors can and should do is look at that cover every 6 months to a year, and just, you know, I do all my own covers now, but I just got done doing the covers for a series that already had really good covers. They just didn't. I finally looked at it and said, this is a great cover for a different genre. In this book, I want to really be more of the military thriller. And so let's redo this and get it to match what's currently trending in military thrillers, changing nothing else about the book, and then put it out there. And I wouldn't technically call that a relaunch, but it is a new kind of a fresh, it's something traditional publishing doesn't really do very often unless they're coming out with a new format, right? So yeah, I think the answer to that question is sure, if it's necessary. And how do we know if it's necessary? That's a much harder question to ask or to answer. It just really comes down to a lot of different things. Is the series not selling very well? What was your expectation with the series? And why do you think it's not selling well? And if you know it's not selling well because of these three small things, well, rather than doing a big relaunch where you lose reviews or whatever, fix those three things and then see, you know, and if still nothing works, then sure, pull it down, redo the whole thing, rewrite it if you need to, whatever, and then we can relaunch it. That's a big undertaking, right?
For sure.
I was going to ask about how you use readers in marketing. And we talked a little bit about street teams and using readers as part of your marketing strategy.
Well, readers are everything, right? The whole reason we do any of this stuff is so we can have people read our work. I mean, there's a certain ego that's required. It's like, if I'm just writing for myself, that's one thing. But I think my stuff is good enough that other people will like it. Those are readers. And so all of what I do eventually comes down to, what do readers want? That's good because they're real people and we can just literally ask them, what do they want? It's also bad, or it's hard, I should say, because authors are not statistical analysts typically, and they're not professional surveyors, people who run surveys, not surveyors, you know what I mean? Surveys are a science, and they're a very, very hard thing to get right. I'm working on this with a consulting client right now who we want to survey his audience. He's got a lot of paying customers through his Patreon campaign, but we want to make sure we ask the questions that will get us the answers that are actually helpful rather than just fun, you know, oh, this is cool. Anyway, I'm getting off track, but yeah, the way I use readers is beta team, or street team is what I call it, is a really big part of my book launch process. I'll have a reader who finds me somehow, gets on my mailing list, and goes through my autoresponder warm-up campaign, whatever you want to call it. And then at some point they get an email that says, hey, do you want free books? And every person in the world clicks that and goes to my street team page, where, as I've gotten a bigger list over time, I've tightened up the rules because I don't want to just give all my books away to everybody. And I want to maintain that list to be about 200 people, that street team. And so I basically say, you have to have left a review of one of my books, and I need a link to it so I can see it. It doesn't have to be 5-star, but just show me that you are actually reviewing. And then you're basically signing on the dotted line that you're going to get a book for free, and you will read a review with few exceptions. And so that's worked really well for me. And what typically happens is I don't just get somebody to read the book and then review it, but they'll actually send me feedback that's good feedback because they've been a reader of mine for some time. And so their feedback is things like, I just sent this out to one of my favorite beta readers. We were emailing back and forth with some mistakes that he had found in my upcoming release. And I made the comment at the end. I said, great, this is number 9 in the Harvey Bennett series. I have no idea where he's going to go next. We'll have to figure that out. Knowing full well that he was going to come back with a super long email telling me all these cool things that I can take Harvey Bennett and do. And that's exactly what he did. And it was great because now we can go back and forth and just, well, what do you know about the Azores Islands and all that, the stuff that he wants to do. And it's really good. It's almost like I have a co-writer, doing some of the research with me. And he doesn't expect anything in return. I'll give him some free swag or whatever, but just acknowledgement and all that. But it's a real life engagement. It's an interaction with a real human being. And authors, I think, can easily forget, I've got 70,000 people on my mailing list. It's easy to become a number when you're just somebody on that list. And so a beta reader process for me or a team is a much better way of managing some of those relationships and actually building some relationships with real people. I know that I can go ask Ray a question like that and get an answer that's not only Ray's answer, but it's an answer for the vast majority of my readers because they're similar in that way. They've found me and they've liked my books. And so, they're all unique snowflakes, of course, but they're also very similar in some ways, like why they like reading my books. And so if I can find a Ray, I can ask him all kinds of questions, and it's way better than just a generalized survey. Does that make sense? So it's like that ideal reader. Once you find them, you kind of harvest them in some ways to work that relationship. And I know I'm making it sound like he's just a marketing tool, but finding that real person is great because instead of just guessing, instead of just wondering what readers want, you can just go ask them.
While you were talking, I was thinking it must sometimes go in the other direction. You must either get feedback that you don't agree with, which I guess is fine, or people maybe making suggestions that really don't work.
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of it is I'm the author. It's my name on the book. And so if I don't like a suggestion, I don't have to use it. Sure. You got to be grateful. There's a word there. I'm not an author, so I don't know words. It's good to be gracious and accepting and saying, hey, I'm so thankful that you sent me this feedback. I'm going to file this away and maybe use it one day, maybe not. And you don't have to commit to anything. Ray doesn't expect that I use his ideas. It's just it's fun for him. This is what he's just hanging out. I did have a reader tell me yesterday, this is funny, I got an email from a kind, sweet lady on my street team, and she'll still be on my street team, even though she didn't like this book. That's how it works. But she just did not like my book. It's called The Mindell Paradox. It's coming out, I don't know, in the future. I'm very lazy about deadlines with that. I've got a traditional publishing deal. I've got to turn in the first book for next week. And so that's all I care about is that deadline. Everything else is just, Anyway, and the book is about Harvey Bennett finding out that there's a company that is doing really sick, twisted experiments on chimps and apes, and then eventually, of course, humans, right? And so it basically opens with this. He's looking at these phone screenshots or pictures of this experiment on a chimp where they actually surgically remove his head and they pop it onto another chimp's spine and they sew it all up, and the chimp is alive. Now, she sent me this email and she was like, this is totally unbelievable. I just couldn't, I made it through because I love you and I'm going to try to send you typos and stuff, but I didn't like it at all. And I was like, hey, that's fair. Here's an article that I based the whole book on. The doctor that I put in the book is actually the same name of the doctor who actually did this experiment and it actually worked. And then they euthanized the chimp afterwards 20 hours later for ethical reasons, right? They've already crossed that line. But this is all real stuff. It's all, I know, it's super weird.
That's a twist I wasn't expecting.
I know, right? Truth is stranger than fiction. But the thing is, I'm probably just not a good enough writer to have pulled it off well, but it's all real. I'm fictionalizing the account, but that experiment is real. And so she didn't like it because she didn't think it was real. Whatever. It's like people who think Jurassic Park isn't real. There's totally dinosaurs somewhere out there. I know there is. Michael Crichton did a good job of making it real and using the science and stuff. But anyway, my point is, we get those readers all the time who are like, I don't like this one. You should do this instead or whatever. And okay, that's great. You can either do one of two things. You can send me the feedback and be happy that I received it and was nice, and even though I didn't use it, or you can just go write your own book and use your own feedback, That's a really mean way of saying, yeah, sure, I get feedback all the time that I don't like and I'm not going to use. But the transaction is not you give me feedback and I will use it. It's you give me feedback and we can go back and forth and have fun talking about what ifs. That doesn't ever mean I'm going to use your feedback. And I think most readers understand that.
Yeah, I think I was thinking more like, does it impact you creatively? Like, or does it?
Okay.
Yeah. I think that was kind of more my idea, is that if you are if you have your own plan of how something's going and then people are throwing your ideas at you, I guess that just depends on you as a writer. I wonder if that would get distracting.
I think it would. My street team doesn't do that kind of stuff because typically when they're hearing from me is when I've already finished a certain book. And so their feedback per se is like Ray's, that's something that doesn't happen very often. I don't really get that kind of stuff from readers very often as far as what to do next or what to write about. Every now and then a reader will come, this is really cool. Did you see this article? This is really neat. Harvey Bennett could go discover this or something. That's more rare, but that kind of stuff happens. I think in other writer universes and other street teams, that could definitely be a problem if you kind of open the door to just send me all your ideas. Mm-hmm. But that's really not how I've set up mine. Not that I don't like ideas, but exactly what you said, when there's too many of them, I don't want people feeling like I didn't use theirs or that I used it and didn't give them credit and, that kind of stuff. I don't want to worry about that. So no, it's usually more of just the feedback that I get from the street team. The vast majority of the time is typos, editing things. What's really been helpful is having readers who will say, hey, I felt like your plot kind of dragged. You made a point about something Ben was thinking about, his inner thoughts kind of thing, but then you kind of belabored it over the course of the next few chapters. I think get off it. That kind of stuff is helpful for me. Because it's more of the craft of it, right? It's more of, okay, there's multiple readers telling me that I'm using a lot of Tom Swifties or whatever. Then, okay, great. Well, then let's stop doing that. Let's just go back to he said, she said.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, like you say, I think most readers would just think it's a cool bonus if an author does take a plot point of theirs.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I try to do my best. I don't think I've done that, overtly, like just the whole idea, whole cloth. But certainly places I've sent Harvey Bennett and his team or any other characters have been ideas that readers have sent me, suggested, you should do something in the Amazon rainforest. That's really cool. There's all kinds of, now I'd always planned on writing a book there. And so that wasn't like all of a sudden I remembered there was a rainforest in Brazil, but that kind of stuff I try to include in the acknowledgments for whatever book. Hey, this reader helped me kind of craft some of this idea, that's usually all they want.
So you seem like you already have like a close relationship with your readers. Do you use social media in addition to your street team, or do you kind of focus on one over the other?
I focus on email. That's sort of that's how I want to communicate. I have social media presence, but it's not something that I put a lot of time or effort into. I don't really check my Facebook author page very often, and my wife is constantly trying to get me on Instagram and doing more things. But I'm like, I'm a millennial, which used to mean I'm a young gun. Now it means I'm like 30 and overweight and my kids are yelling at me all the time. And Gen Z can do the Instagram stuff. I'm more like, I just want to email people and do my interactions that way because it's easier for me to manage headspace wise.
You don't want to TikTok?
I've got a presence, but what's that? Yeah, no,
you don't want to TikTok?
TikTok. No, I'll be one of the deaths on TikTok if I try to do something like that. My theory on social media is it's an outpost, whereas your website, your email list, that's your home base. And so the difference is it's something that you are fully in control of and you fully own. I own my mailing list. I would never sell it, but it's mine. I could do with it what I want. Same thing with my website. I don't really own my Facebook account. Facebook does. They're just letting me use it. They can change it at any time. Amazon's the same way. Any website that we use as authors that's not ours is an outpost. So those are important because they can be places to find new readers that haven't discovered you yet. But I always point them back to my home base. I always point them back to my email list, my website, whatever the thing is that I own.
I haven't thought of it that way before, but that makes total sense.
You mentioned earlier that you were working on a deadline for a trad publishing deal. Does that mean that is this the first time that you're dabbling in traditional publishing as well as indie?
It is. It's the first time I've done like a straight up traditionally published deal with everything that means. I did get an advance from Amazon once to do a Kindle Worlds book when A.G. Riddle launched his Kindle World. There were 3 authors. They actually gave us a commission and said, write a book and we'll put it in Kindle Worlds. So that was sort of like a traditional deal because it was like I say traditional deal basically just meaning somebody else is going to do whatever they want with my book and then they're going to pay me for it instead of just by royalties. Because every deal looks a little different. That's how I'm defining it. And this deal, this is the first one I've done with a traditional publisher. They're in the UK. Book Couture. They're pretty popular now. Yeah, they're doing some really good stuff. And so when Emily there reached out to me and wanted to chat about it, I was excited right away because they just seem like they get it. They seem like they understand, like you guys. It seems like you understand the climate or the industry.
And they do thrillers really well, specifically.
They seem to do thrillers really well. Yeah, exactly. But no, there's a lot of traditional publishers. Actually, there's not as many now. But Simon & Schuster just went on the chopping block to get sold.
What?
Yeah, they're I think CBS Viacom owned them, and they're listed them for. I don't think there's anything wrong with the company. I think they're just trying to they have to turn a certain profit, and so Simon & Schuster's not doing that, so they're going to cut it. But these companies like that are unless it's an imprint of them, the company at large is in the business of printing dead trees. Like they're not really in the business of selling books. That's how they do it. That's a medium for selling their dead trees. So it's always fascinating to me when a traditional publisher like that is having trouble. It's like, well, do you guys not pay attention? Like, do you not see that people are reading in different ways? Or, we're listening to books now. We're reading them on our phones. Like this isn't 1995, and you can't treat it like that or you're going to die. Sorry, that's just business. So Book Couture seems to be really at the cusp of like what traditional I think is going to look like in about 10 or 15 years. They're doing it now. So I'm excited to be partnered with them. This will be a 3-book deal. Well, when I turn the first one, we'll see if there'll be 2 more books. They said there would be, but they haven't read it yet. So I'm sure there will be 3. Brand new series, brand new character, and it'll be a little different than what I've done before. But I think.
How are you finding it? Like as an indie author that's used to doing everything on your own, is it refreshing to be able to sit back and just be like, I'm going to do the words, and you deal with everything, or do you feel like you're losing? Yeah.
No. And then she called me a couple times, and like I think she expected me to be more like, wait, I don't have control over the cover, I don't have control over the title or anything. And because I think a lot of authors probably do that. I was like, look, I do this plenty of times. I got a bunch of co-written stuff coming out this year. I got my own books coming out. I'm doing covers for all of them. You want to do all this work? Go for it. You just give me a check. That sounds awesome. Let's do it. It's your book. That's how I'm treating it. And it is really refreshing. I get to write it. I get to make the characters do little things that I want them to do. And then I give it to them and they fix it and sell it or not. We'll see. But it is really nice to just not have to worry about all that control. I like it. I'm not against control. That's why I got into this whole thing, doing it that way. But it is really cool to feel like I have a team, where it's like, I do my part and then you guys all do the stuff to make it a really bang up product.
Sounds cool. So I guess my question is, I was going to say a general like self-publishing business advice, but I was going to change it and say, since you're an established author, do you have any advice for other established authors out there? Something that they should be doing that you don't think they are?
In general, I mean, I probably couldn't say something generally because there's authors that are doing the thing or whatever, like relaunching series or new covers and all that. I wrote a book, and this isn't supposed to be like a shameless sales pitch, but the nonfiction book that I'd been working on accidentally for many years, I finally launched earlier this year. And I gave a talk at Superstars Conference on this topic, this idea. And the idea is very simple. It's no matter where you are in your career, there is something you can do right now to get you to the next level. And that sounds very obvious, right? But I think what authors, especially established ones like where I am, we get to this point where we're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing everything. The only way I can make more money, the only way I can increase revenue stream is writing more books. And I just feel like I'm tapped out. Or writing better books, and I feel like I'm writing the best book that I can without going to get a literary degree. I don't know what I'm supposed to do to improve my craft. So those are the 2 big things we think. Well, I'm obviously doing all the things that I need to be doing. How can I get to the next level without writing more books and writing better books? Now, writing better books and writing more books are always good things. If you're not where you think you should be, then get better, of course. But all I'm saying, and my whole point with that was, there are these different levels of author success. And I totally invented them. They're just mine. They don't have to be everybody else's. But I found 8 of them. And it's essentially just recognizing where you are on these platforms and then trying to get to the next one by doing the things that level does and then getting really good at them. And just real quick, I can give you an example. But like a level 7 author, for example, would be someone who is killing it. They're selling a ton of books. They're making products around their characters. They're doing cookbooks or whatever, the different things that aren't, actually just new fiction. And they want to get to level 8 and become kind of that guru speaker type people the author who could just Neil Gaiman, you can just walk into a room and talk to people. It has nothing to do with his books. It's just people, he's a celebrity figure almost. And the way to get to that level 8 is by starting to build a team around you. So you're still doing the same things, but instead of you actually doing that work, you have a team that's doing that work for you. And that's a very probably poor, vague example, but it's just goes to show there's always something you can do right now to get to the next level. It starts with figuring out what level you're on, and then figuring out what level you want to get to, and then setting deadlines and doing all the business things that we are supposed to do. Yeah, that's probably what I would say. There's not a simple single, well, everybody just redesign your covers now. It's time. You know, most authors at my level already know that that's important and that that's something they should be looking at. They may not have the time to do it or the money at this point, but I couldn't say there's not one blanket thing that I would say every author needs to do.
I think that's good advice. And I like that you like split it up into different levels.
I tried. Yeah. And that was the whole point, was obviously there are different levels. I mean, somebody who just wrote one book and has no audience is at a different level than the guy who's, Neil Gaiman, and so I tried to figure out, okay, what are the delineations between these levels, and then what do they look like? And so then you can kind of see where you are, and okay, well, I don't really want to go to the next level. I'm happy where I am here, and I just want to do more. Well, that's great. You can stay there, but at least now, that was the whole point with all that.
Definitely. Where do you see publishing in the next 5-10 years?
Oh, I love that question. That is such a good question. So I see publishing becoming more of a Netflix style recommendations engine for readers. I truly believe that readership will increase. People will read more books in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. Most people don't, I wouldn't say most, I have no idea what the numbers are, but a certain number of people don't read. And I don't think it's because they don't know how to read. I think it's because they've never found that book or that genre that they love. I remember in high school, I grabbed a copy of my dad's copy of Da Vinci Code. And I loved reading. As a kid, I would read the back of the toilet paper bag, or whatever, just because I just loved to read. Anything and everything. Read the car manual on one road trip because I ran out of books to read. And then somewhere in middle school or high school, I just stopped reading for fun because it wasn't fun anymore. I was being forced to read crap like Heart of Darkness. I'm sorry, Conrad. It just sucks.
The longest short story you'll ever read.
I stopped reading because it was no fun. And my reading time was kind of force fed. It was like I had to read this book and do a paper on it or whatever. And I didn't want to do that. And so I didn't push reading out altogether. And then I found Da Vinci Code and I read it, and say what you will about Dan Brown, I was totally hooked.
It's very readable.
So
that
readable,
book,
right?
I devoured it
fun.
as well.
Yeah. And it wasn't going to ever win any literary awards, and he didn't try to. It was commercial fiction. It's genre fiction. There's a point for that and a market for that. And I picked it up and I was like, holy crap, this is probably the only book that's ever been written like this. And I was very wrong. There's a lot of Dan Brown wrote a lot of those books too.
Yeah.
And so that opened the doors for me. And it was, right before college. And so I found how to read again. I discovered my love for it. So anyway, fast forward 10 or 15 years, I think we're going to have, or I should say, we won't have to go find them like I did. They'll find us. There'll be ways of getting books that are perfectly in line with our genre, with what we like to read. And we didn't even know we liked to read that stuff. I found that I loved science fiction that way. I was recommended in a book that popped up because a lot of my readers also bought that book. And, oh, wow, that's very different than what I usually read. I love it. So now I'm going through all the best science fiction in history, reading all that stuff and loving it. So my point is, we're at the cusp also in tech where artificial intelligence is a very real thing. Artificial, I should say, general intelligence, not super intelligence, of course, right? We're not going to have Terminator or anything anytime soon. I don't think. People will disagree with that. But artificial intelligence, meaning, here's an example. And I'll use Amazon Kindle as an example just because they're ubiquitous and they're sitting on this gold mine, and I don't know why they're not using it. But I read when I go to bed. I've got kids, and so that's really the only time that I've got just to read. And I'm also very tired, so I read like 5 pages and I'm asleep. And it is connected to their server whenever I'm connected to the Wi-Fi on my Kindle. So they have that information somewhere. They may not know they do, but that data is in there. They know that I read usually between this hour and this hour for about 15 minutes. They also know what I like to read because they know exactly how I've gone in those books and how long, okay, well, he got 5% of this one and it's not finished and he never finished it. So putting that data together, companies, and I don't think Amazon will be the best company to do this at all, but some company out there, some small company publisher will probably look at that data and be able to say, we're going to market this short story to Nick because he's going to be able to finish that before he falls asleep. And it'll be the most satisfying read he's ever had in his life because as soon as he finishes in the end, he's asleep. And then he can dream about that all night and it's great. So that kind of recommendation engine is, I think, what's coming. We're going to be able to, it's going to be like Minority Report. We're walking through and our eyeballs will be generate some advertising that's specific to us and all that stuff. futuristic stuff will happen, but then the core of it will be the books that publishers are really selling well are going to be the books that are sold directly to the consumer rather than mass marketing to the consumer. 100 copies, and you tell people this is the book they're going to read, even if that's not their genre. You just have a big stand in the front of the bookstore, and the signed copies or whatever. Now it's going to be, I just want to sell this one book to this one person, and then the next one I'll sell a different book to this person, and then this book to this person, and that's what's going to be the biggest difference. I'm sorry, that was a very long and meandering answer to your question.
It was great. Interesting. It's a little creepy.
It's super creepy.
Do you remember the old Netflix recommendations? Do you like female-driven romances with, I don't know, they were really, really specific that they seem to have moved away from.
And I think they still kind of do that. They have a percentage that they think you'll like, right? But they got the creepiness factor is still there. We just don't know it's there, right? They know that this is why it's a 98% match, but they're not going to tell us that, or we're going to freak out because it's creepy.
I don't know. I kind of miss those.
I do too. I thought it was great.
Because I'm just thinking, like in your example, I don't know that just because I'm reading for a very short time that I necessarily want to finish.
That's fair. That's absolutely valid. Sure.
Yeah, but a lot of the ways that books are marketed work well for me. Those people also read this or people also bought this. I don't know. Where do you guys get your book recommendations? Is it friends or is it algorithms?
Honestly, it's Goodreads. I'll look at the rating.
I love
decide
Goodreads
if I like
for
it.
That. I know.
Yeah.
Wait, are you the two people keeping Goodreads around?
Yes, I know Goodreads gets a lot of flack for being old and not updated, but I love Goodreads. I
used Goodreads back then, but it was just mean to me a lot, and so I decided not to ever use it because it was just I was like, people are cruel.
Oh, because you have your own books up there? Yeah, I can see that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I like being able to be like, I've read this.
Totally. No, I'm with you. I'm in a really beautiful place in my life because I have more books than I can care to ever get through in a lifetime. Loaded up on my Kindle, just because other authors in my genre will send them, or I'll go buy something from Steve Berry, releases. And I read pretty slow now. Like I said, I'm good for maybe 5 or 10 pages of fun reading. If I read now, if I get my Kindle out, if I'm not reading somebody I'm co-writing with and need to finish edits for something or whatever, then I feel really guilty. And so I just don't do it. And that sucks, but I typically will wait until bedtime. The point is, I don't really need to look at any recommendations ever again because those books will just, kind of be there. I'll read the next Kevin Tomlinson book because he's my best friend and he's got 5 books out that I haven't read yet. So there's just a long list. James Rollins has got all his books on my shelf up here. After Dan Brown, I found James Rollins, and he was kind of like, he had more books out. And so I was like, oh, this is great. And he was releasing them faster. So I caught up and was on every time he released a book, I'd read it, And so now it's great because I've got 2 of his books that I haven't read yet. So I'm like, okay, great. Well, I know what I'll read next whenever I get around to it is the next James Rollins book because I know I'll like it. So
do you have any authors that you think have inspired you or influenced you in any way?
All of those authors I just mentioned, totally. I think, I mean, that's the thing, right? None of this stuff is from a vacuum. I didn't just all of a sudden come up with these tropes or whatever. I read them and I loved what they did to my mind. It got me to think in a certain way or got me to experience something in a certain way. And then it's just been constantly trying to emulate that. I want the feeling when you read Jurassic Park for the first time. It was even better before the movie came out because, we all know what to expect now. But when they're explaining how they did this, the dino DNA, right? It was incredible because you're just like, oh my God, this makes sense. This is real. And you want to put the book down and go start researching because you're like, there's going to be dinosaurs tomorrow. Like I said, they're somewhere. It's Costa Rica, right? They're somewhere on that island. I know it for a fact. Anyway, that's feeling that and being able to invoke a sense of, childish desire for knowledge. That was the best thing about some of these authors like James Rollins. It's all sort of unbelievable when you strip away how well it's written. He just tells you what it's about. Oh, it's this tree in the Amazon that keeps people alive and, forever. Okay, that's weird, right? That's not real. But then when you're reading it, you're like, oh my God, yeah, totally. 100%. You get sucked into this tree and you live there forever as like a face. Yeah, totally, 100%. I'm sure that's there. I don't know how to do that, right? I that's what I want to get better at as an author. And so that's when I say inspiration, that's what I try to pick apart of other authors. The Dan Brown is like the master to me of being able to weave all of these clues together that don't seem to make any sense. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, Jesus did have a kid. That's totally realistic. Absolutely. How we got there, it seems like there's no way it would make sense, but then it's perfect. Right. Anyway, yes. So I get a lot of inspiration from other authors, and especially the old school guys that were always traditionally published that I read back in high school and college.
Very cool. And then where can listeners find you online?
I have a website, nickthacker.com. That is probably the best place. You can get some free books if you sign up for the mailing list. But I'm giving away all 3 full-length thrillers, so go do that. If you've never read one of mine, send me an email. Yeah, if readers are out there wondering if I'll actually respond and if I'm a real person and all that, that's my favorite thing, is to get any kind of response. Even if I hate your book and you suck, I'll respond. So
thank you.
I appreciate you too. Yeah. I get a little snarky. There's sometimes readers are mean to me, and I'm like, well, hey, I don't actually have a full-time job anymore where I have a boss and I'm representing a different company. Like, this is all me, so I'm gonna represent me. I'm gonna be mean to you back. So anyway,
it's wild that they'll go out of their way.
Like, people forget when they're emailing. They're like, there's a human on the other side of this. It's not the worst thing to remind them.
And it's always the readers who got my books for free from like a book club deal or something, and then they're pissed that like they didn't like it or I did something that they think is wrong. I'm like, okay, sorry, enjoy your free book. You want a refund for $0?
Amazing.
I feel like people forget. I keep seeing people tagging authors on Twitter with like a bad review, and I'm like, why? Why?
Yeah.
Why? Like, that's so cruel.
Twitter's
I
a
see a lot of
cesspool,
authors being like,
It
don't
is.
do it. You don't need to hear your hot take on my book if it's going to be mean.
Oh man, I just did a live video with a buddy of mine, and we read all our favorite 1-star reviews on Facebook. It was great.
I love it.
That's a good idea.
That's a really fun idea.
Yeah, we had a screenshot of like, I actually had a 5-star review. That was my favorite. I left it for last. And basically it was on my first book that I'd ever written, but it was a recent review. And she said 5 stars. You might be wondering why I gave this author 5 stars. Now, we know it's crap and we know it's like horrendous and objectively terrible in every way, but this is a real person. And so like he had to click the publish button. It was just this long, it was crazy, insane. And I loved it. And so I was, oh, this is amazing. Every time I am going to call out this person for writing this review because it's so ridiculous. And I did.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. We should do this again, but appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're looking for Nick's books, we will include links to them in the show notes on the blog. And if you're looking for tips for growing your sales, visit kobowritinglife.com.
This episode was produced by Stephanie McGrath and Joni DePlacido. This episode was edited by Kelly Robotham. Music was provided by Tearjerker. And special thanks to Nick for being a guest on our episode. If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing!